Hey everybody, it is just before Christmas of 2025 and I'm here at the train station in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey. This is my go-to brick and mortar store to buy my trains, and they just got a new locomotive from Lionel that I pre-ordered last year. But before I get to that, the train station is doing a fundraiser for the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, or MMRF, in honor of the store's late owner, David Shaw, who sadly passed away the previous year from myeloma. For every $50 donation, you have a chance to win the Vision Line Erie Triplex Super Set that Lionel released last year. This raffle ends on New Year's Eve, but if you'd like to just chip into the foundation, that's great as well. You can call the train station at the phone number shown or through their website at train-station.com. Anyways, on to what I ordered. It is the new Lionel Vision Line J1e Hudson. This was announced in October 2024 and was finally shipped in early December 2025. So we're going to open it up, take a look at it, and see how I feel about it. So Lionel offered quite a few variations of the J1e Hudson for this offering. I ordered the 5403 model just to get something a little bit different. For full transparency, I did order one of the 5344 ones as well. It is the one with the high gloss finish. I'm keeping it in the box for now in case something happens to my original 2010 model. You'll see why when I go over this and compare it with some of Lionel's previous scale Hudsons that have been made for previous commemorative years. But in terms of the Hudsons that Lionel was offering for this wave, they offered the 5344, they offered the 5403 like you see here, they offered the 6620 which is in the big 4 markings, they offered a post-war 5320 without the classification lights, they offered 5401 with the PT tender and the water scoop feature. They also had a Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo model and a couple fantasy paint schemes, which I personally don't care about, but some people will. Alright, so we'll start off with the Locomotive. Here's 5403 out of the box and all the styrofoam inserts taken out. At first glance, it looks pretty good. Very nice paint application. This is more of the satin or maybe matte finish, you could call it. But I personally like it. Very nice pavement application in general, no rough or sloppy edges, no hastily stamped lettering on the cab or on the headlight right here. I'm not sure how I feel if I'm a fan of this graphite colored smoke box. I know it's prototypical, but I'm so used to the J1e class being all black, or at least close to being all black. I believe the Lionel catalog showed this a little bit darker in comparison. We'll see how I'm feeling about this color in a couple of months and if I feel like changing that or darkening that up a little bit. So right off the bat, I want to talk about this unpainted stainless steel looking pilot truck up here. And this is something that other hobbyists have already brought up when these engines first started being shipped out. It doesn't bother me so much. It does feel strange Lionel went this route this time around though. I will say I am glad that Lionel supplied a scale-sized pilot truck with each of these locomotives instead of offering them for separate sale like they were originally planning. Here's what it looks like right here. It looks like it has 2 real scale flanges, which is a little weird and probably aggravating to those who wanted to run this and still on their tubular track or for 3 real layouts with those 72 curves, but I think this should be fine on like Atlas or T-Rail type track, which I will probably planning to do. And again, it is nice that Lionel did supply this with the locomotives instead of making you buy them separately off their parts site. One detail that I never noticed until my friend Greg of K's Models, go subscribe to his channel, mentioned it, but you notice these weird bulging suction cup like mounts where the handrail stanchions go in. This is not present on the J3A class Hudsons Lionel started making in the early 2000s. I actually had to take a look at the rest of the Hudsons that Lionel has made over the years, and apparently this goes all the way back to the 1997 scale Hudson number 5344 they made with the Fantasy Vanderbilt tender. That was the first scale Hudson with Trainmaster Command. They had to modify it to accept the handrail antennas and the new plastic stanchions. Unfortunately, this detail seemed to have been copied on nearly every Hudson that Lionel used the tooling of since, including the 2010 Vision 700E, which we'll take a look at in a bit. And unfortunately, that inadvertently seems to have been copied onto these new Hudsons. I think it is also more noticeable on this model since the smoke boxes are graphite instead of black, and these bulges are most noticeable towards the front like I'm showing here. While I don't think this is totally awful, once I saw it, I unfortunately couldn't unsee it. So I figured this would be a good time as any to put the new Hudson next to a couple of older Lionel Hudsons that I have in the collection to see how they compare. So on the far right is the 1990 1-700E scale Hudson, number 5340 from the Richard Kuhn era of Lionel. In the middle is the original Vision Line 700E Hudson, number 5344 from 2010. The 5340 was made by Lionel Trains Inc. to celebrate Lionel's 90th birthday, and the 5344 in the middle here was for Lionel's 110th birthday. So here's the 5340 from 1990. This model is strictly conventional, being made before TMCC was first unleashed in 1994. It has the old school mechanical reversing unit, the AC pull-more motor, the post-war style liquid drop puffing smoke unit, and rail sounds one in the tender, which was relatively new for the time. I don't run this model that much, but mine did come with a really nice display case that sits in my bedroom. It's pretty primitive by today's standards, and it can't pull long trains with the old pull-more motor, but I think it's still a very nice model. One rather unique feature of the 5340, or at least a lot of the O-gauge 3-rail steam locomotives that were being released in the early 90s, is these stainless steel chrome-plated driving rods and linkage and the driver rims. Nowadays, I think people would expect these to be blackened, or at the very least dulled out so they're not as shiny, but I think it's something that is a nice little callback to the original scale Hudson. One nice little detail about the 5340 is this little brass plaque that's bolted to the underside of the trailing truck right here. It states that it was proudly made in the United States of America, and again, it's 1990, so the majority of Lionel's production was still in the United States at the time. And for those who own the TM books and video, the making of the Lionel scale Hudson, you'll probably get a better understanding of how much work actually goes into making a model train locomotive like this. By the way, TM still makes that video. It's still on their site. I would highly recommend you checking out that video to get a better understanding of the production of model trains. Moving on to the 5344, this is definitely a step up visually and technologically from the 5340 that preceded it 20 years prior. You've got the illuminated classification lights, albeit with these big fat LED wires coming out of them. You got the more refined detail on the running gear. You got the more detailed whistle and the opening cab roof vents, which are always really nice. It should be noted that when this model was made, it wasn't made as a super accurately detailed J1e Hudson, but more of a modern update of the original Lionel 700E. So while it is technologically up to date, or at least the time when it was released, you'll notice the somewhat plainer details reminiscent of the old school Hudson, such as the lack of builder plates under the smoke box right there, and also the very obvious molded cab windows. Also, interestingly enough, this one does not have the chain detail on the coupler cut bar up front here that's connecting to the scale front coupler, which is a bit weird since Lionel has always given those details on older Hudsons. What's really good is this model has the more powerful maintenance-free DC can motor combined with the legacy speed control. So this thing will creep very well and pull nice long trains and climb realistic gradients. So here's a comparison shot of the three Hudsons up front. You'll notice that the 5403 has some pretty nice updates over the previous models. It has the nicer chain detail in the coupler cut bar right here. It also has these nice air hoses with the glad hand connectors up on the pilot. That's a very nice touch. It also has these really nice scale looking class light housing things that look much closer to the real Hudson. And they also moved the big, fat, stupid LED leads behind these housings, so they're far less noticeable. I think this looks so much better than how they looked on the 2010 model. You can see the leads coming out right through the front of the boiler. One nice little thing about all these Hudsons is that if I do this, they all have opening boiler fronts. And in the case of the 2010 model, this could stay open, and the 2025 model, you can see the inside of the boiler. It's not quite in the spot that it should be to be correct, but it is a nice little touch. It also makes it easier to replace the headlights in case you need to replace them. Here's a closer up look of those class light housings on the new 5403. This also has the bicolor class light feature that Lionel has been including on their engine since 2020, so that's a nice touch. One nice thing that the bicolor class light equipped engines have is that all the class and the marker light housings have these very nice clear lenses, which I prefer over the simple green or red colored lenses that Lionel has been using in the previous years. I also want to talk about class lights because I think Lionel overall has the best looking class lights. K-Line has done some pretty decent looking class lights. MTH, how they do the class lights on their scale Hudsons always looks kind of ugly because they're kind of sticking out way back here, which looks kind of ugly in my opinion. I think the Lionel how they do their class light, looks much better in my opinion, at least for the Hudsons they do. At least for the J1Es, not so much for the J3As. Here's a closer look up at the boiler on the 5403. You'll notice some more refined details, again, like the builder's plates on the smoke box right here. The rivet detail is a little bit more refined than on the previous models. The previous models' rivets look a little bit more bulgy. You've got this nice seam running down the center of the boiler right here. The whistle also has this nice reflector shield too. I don't think I've ever seen Lionel include this detail on a Hudson before. I know K-Line and Third Rail did, and Williams once on their brass J3A. It's a pretty nice little detail. And like the 5344, the 5403 has the CAN motor and the legacy speed control, so this should also handle any realistic grade reconnaissance without any problem. Let me see if I can get a little bit closer. You can see the nice cab vents that open and close. Again, something the Vision 5344 had, but the 1991 didn't have yet. You can see what I mean by the boilers on these two versions being much cleaner. Doesn't have the seam, they don't have the whistle shield. The whistle is, as I pointed out earlier, a little bit more detailed than the old toy train looking whistle on the 5340, as you can see there. So here's a close-up of the cabs of all the three Hudsons side by side. On the right, you can see that the very exposed AC motor in the 5340 right here, as well as this tether to power the rail sounds in the tender. You'll also notice this socket arrangement right here. If you move this socket over to this plug on the engineer's side, you could lock the mechanical reverse unit into one direction. But as for the other two, both have these really nice cab interiors with crew figures. These dials on both of these models also illuminate. And if you look at the 5403, you'll have this nice drop plate, which is becoming standard on all Lionel steam locomotives. Thank goodness. I'm glad Lionel is including this as a standard feature detail. And you also notice that the engineer is reaching for the throttle, which is a nice little touch. And should note that both Vision Hudsons also have this nice cab window glass in all the windows. One really nice thing about all of Lionel's J1e Hudsons is, if you look very carefully, this radius rod assembly right above the steam chest here, they all function like the real Hudsons did on this sliding valve in the valve guide assembly here. That is something that was on the original Lionel 700E. In fact, the only locomotive they made that would have this, except maybe the original Pennsylvania V6 scale switcher from the 30s, and I've never seen any other manufacturer include this nice feature on any other locomotive, at least in 3-rail O scale. They also have this very nice lubricator lever on the driver's side, thankfully not too big to look comical. I should note that this lever probably should be facing in the other direction, since I haven't seen any real photos of this lever facing in this specific direction. But this was always such a nice feature I loved about the Lionel scale Hudsons, and again, something that MTH, K-Line, even 3rd rail hasn't been able to replicate since. Here's the 5403's tender. This is the pretty standard Hudson 12-wheel tender. One nice thing that Lionel did upgrade over the previous versions is that it has a kinematic drawbar, which allows it to spread out a little bit more on curves and then come back in a very closer space coupling on straightaways. It also has the Katy coupler adapter. Let me see if I can put this under, but if you look carefully, right, yeah, there's the screw holes for the Katy coupler adapter, which is included in the packaging. This is what the little screws in this little metal box are for. I probably will convert this to Katy sometime later, but one minor misstep is, if I look at the back, see, there should be a line of rivets right around where my finger is, where the number is stamped. This is something carried over from the original Lionel Hudson tender tooling. It's a bit of a shame this never got fixed even after all this time. It also would have been nice if they put safety trains on the trucks like the Strasbourg Brass Hybrid 90 did. This is my first locomotive that also has the Vision Force coupler feature, and I've heard mixed feelings on that. So we'll see how useful it is in the long run. Here's a quick view of all three of the tenders side by side. You'll notice that the 5340 and the new 5403, the lettering and the numerals are in white, whereas the Vision 700D from 2010 has the lettering and numerals in kind of this faded silver color. I personally prefer the white numerals and text. It just kind of stands out much better against all the black. Something else is that you'll notice the 5340 doesn't have a backup light. I don't remember which Lionel scale Hudson exactly had the backup light first. It might have been the first J3A, but I think the Vision Line 5344 here was the first J1e made by Lionel to have the backup light. And I think some people complain that the J3A, the first one to have it, also shouldn't have those red marker lights. So Lionel has stopped giving the Hudsons the marker lights ever since. Here's another close-up of the tenders. You can see also the different drawbars that Lionel was using. Look at the 5340. There's the end for that banana plug to give power to the rail sounds board and the tenders. And if I flip this over quick, yeah, a little magnet, that's the Hall effect sensor. That was used to trigger the original rail sounds chuffing. So the more this magnet spun, the more reads the Hall effect sensor would get, and the chuffing would increase as the locomotive went faster. You can also see the 700T or Timken marked truck roller bearings, which is always a nice touch. And there's the Lionel's original speaker for the rail sounds in there. But you also see that the 5340's tender had this kind of molded plastic coal load, sort of a tribute to the original Lionel 700E. But you look at the new scale Hudsons, they both have the up to standard real coal load in the tender. And I think you can also see that both the 5340 and the 5344, they kind of have a semi-gloss finish, versus the more matte finish on the 5403 here. So I have added this to my legacy control system and have given it a bit of a test run, and performance-wise, it's absolutely fantastic. It's very quiet and smooth, 4 chops per wheel revolution as it should be. All the vision features like the swinging bell and the whistle steam effect work perfectly. This thing smokes a vigorous amount. You won't have to complain about the smoke units not giving you enough smoke, but I'm a bit mixed on the sounds of the new Hudson, if I'm being totally honest. The bell and chuffing sounds are pretty standard fare, but they still sound pleasing to the ear. And these have the number-specific crew talk, although I rarely use the crew talk nowadays. The sound quality is really nice and loud, as to be expected on Lionel legacy locomotives. But I think the major bummer for me personally with the sounds is the whistles. There are 2 Nathan 6-chime whistles, one at high pressure and one at medium pressure. You'll hear them when I put this on the layout, but I wouldn't say either are bad whistles. It definitely grows on you over time and is relatively accurate to the 6-chime the New York Central used on the real Hudsons, but I don't think it's as awesome as the whistle that they used on the 2010 Hudson. And again, I'll show you in comparison of what they sound like side by side. Strangely, Lionel didn't include the whistle on the 2010 model as a choice on this newest model. We have a Pennsy whistle, we have a New Norfolk and Western whistle, we have a Southern Pacific whistle, in addition to the 2 Nathan 6-chimes. This is what kind of frustrates me with Lionel sound choices in current day. I think either you should include the proper whistle or bell from the get-go, or include the 5 whistles and bells that sound the closest to the ones the real locomotives in question used, not just throw ones in at random. This was something I didn't like about their legacy Greenwires that had no C&O-based whistles, or the most recent Pierre Marquette 1225 with the wrong bell chime, or the Chicago and Northwestern SD40-2s that didn't even have a gong bell, even though it has a gong bell detail. Maybe I'm just missing the days when Lionel had the substantial edge on sounds and 3-rail up until the early 2010s or so, and those days seem to be sadly long gone. So before we get to the running part of the video, I figured I'd give my thoughts on all 3 of the Lionel Hudsons here, and you can decide which one you think is the best of them. I'd say if you want a Lionel scale Hudson that captures the feel of the original pre-war 700E, both inside and outside, and you don't have a lot of money to spend right now, I'd go with the 5340 from 1990. It's got most of the original Lionel mechanics inside for those who want to keep things old school and easy to fix, and can be found typically in the $400 to $500 range today, give or take depending on the condition and if it comes with a display case like mine did. Keep in mind that these 5340s were originally $1,200 to $1,400 when these were new in 1990. And while I like the original rail sound system, if you don't, you can turn them off with a volume knob under the tender. If you want a more technologically advanced Lionel scale Hudson with most of the modern and snazzy legacy features that still maintain the aura of the original 700E, I'd go with the 2010 Vision model. These models used to fetch well over its original $1,600 retail price, but they're starting to mellow out again to around $1,200 to $1,400. They're not exactly the rarest models anymore, but still expect to pay a decent sum of cash. The other version in gunmetal gray that came out alongside this particular model commands notably less in comparison. While it might not exactly live up to the Vision line in terms of accuracy and extreme detail, it still has character and has a lot of unique sounds that we'll likely never see on a Lionel Hudson ever again, especially that awesome 5-chime New York Central whistle and the older New York Central based crew talk. I think even after 15 years, that's why this is still my favorite Hudson in my current roster. The only real downside is a lot of the internal electronic components aren't supplied on Lionel's parts site anymore, so I pray none of the electronics inside this particular model quit on me anytime soon. But if you have the big bucks, want the newest features, and the more accurate detailing, and want one readily available at most dealers at the time of writing, the new J1e Hudson should fit the bill nicely. Lionel has made quite a few versions for this newest runs, like I said earlier, so there should be at least one option that will satisfy you. As I've stated earlier, you might be disappointed that certain accurate details, lack of exclusive vision features, and certain sounds may not totally be up to snuff for your discerning eyes and ears. I'm a little split. This is a good model. Good in the new model is really good, and I think Lionel made it as good as they could in terms of basic internal and external construction, at least in the specific one that I purchased. But it's also little things they left out that, if included, could have transformed this grade 8 or 9 model into a 10 out of 10 model. I thought about this before 2025 even started, but this might be my last new Lionel purchase from here on out, or at least until the company goes through a major overhaul. I pre-ordered this before 2025 started and unfolded into the steaming mess it turned into. For its 125th anniversary, this felt like a very hollow one. Aside from these new Hudsons and the new upcoming K4 Pacifics coming out next year, it felt like everything else Lionel made this year was just an easy placeholder or an afterthought. And what did get made still showed a somewhat drop-off in Lionel quality overall. Paint colors haven't exactly improved in terms of accuracy on many road names. The starter sets are getting a bit cheaper, the sounds are getting noticeably more generic, and the prices on all products are jumping into the stratosphere while the majority of consumers are dealing with tariffs, a recession, and a distraught job market. While this isn't just a Lionel problem, or even just in the model railroading realm in general, they are arguably the easiest to point fingers at in terms of prices, and I think justifiably. And I get it. Lionel trains have always been expensive, and they are a luxury good. But I also have to ask, do you feel like you are getting your money's worth with what you're getting? I'm starting to feel like I'm not. Most of us aren't willing to shell out this much money for trains. Now, I know they're expensive, but should they be this expensive? Especially if the quality, even on the premium items, doesn't match the price marks. On top of everything else we have to focus on money on in current day. And that's not counting how Lionel up on top seems to be doing really gross stuff like using generative AI for their marketing on Facebook and Instagram. If you don't know what I mean, you look at their Facebook page or their Instagram page, you'll know exactly what I mean. But despite how all this generative AI stuff in general is absolute garbage in every way, and most artists are getting laid off while simultaneously getting their hard-made artwork stolen to feed these hollow corporate slot machines. Like, if you, a major corporation, need to use lazy, hollow, and stupidly expensive generative AI tech to sell your products, yet gives me no reason to buy them. If you couldn't tell, as an artist myself, I hate looking at all this AI slop that Facebook and all the other social media apps seem to be buried in now, because it's all, to put it bluntly, bullshit. The Lionel name simply isn't enough to keep customers coming back anymore. You have to back it up. And the sad thing is we've been here before. In the late 90s, when Lionel had recently gotten purchased by Wellsprings, ridiculously high prices mixed with poor quality and awful marketing decisions almost obliterated Lionel. Not help the competition, especially MTH, was absolutely smoking them. I'm not the only one saying this, but Lionel really needs someone like Richard Kuhn or Neil Young to take the reins again and get the company back down to earth. But I feel like that won't be happening anytime soon in this current erratic environment. While I don't want to end this video on such a downer note, I feel like it needs to be said as a person who loves to revival gauge and is just kind of jaded by the current state of the three-rail realm. Between this, MTH making constant political slop, and Atlas gobbling up microtrains and laying off Ladder's entire staff, things look kind of bleak right now. I mean, at least we still have third rail, Menards, and Ready Made, but man, I just look at 5340 and the 5344 next to this new one, and I think of what was said back in the 90s about how we'd look back on those days and say they were the golden days of trains, and I feel like that's so true. Now, before everyone here tries to tune me out, I just want to say I'm voicing this because I want to see Lionel and these other guys in 3Rev do better. I'm not just being a negative Nancy and not trying to grift or trying to diss on Lionel for clout. I'm not the only one saying this. Plenty of friends who are super into 3RO have been saying Lionel really needs to step up again, because if they lose, everyone else likely will too. Lionel has been doing some good stuff, like going to comic conventions to get the Lionel name out in areas outside of the hobby realm. But especially now, where competition isn't as strong as it used to be in the 90s, I really want to see Lionel and 3RO improve and progress, and not just ride on being good enough.
Train 1 brakeman, NYC 5403. We're showing 90 pounds on the rear of the train. Take out 20 for initial terminal brake test. Over. That's a Roger. 20-pound reduction given. Checking for leakage. Out. Roger. Showing 20 pounds. Walking the train. Brakeman out. Please stand by. Out. Understood, Cleveland. Let me know when I'm clear. Cleveland, this is 5403. Ready to make our pull. Can we get permission to occupy the main?
You're cleared outbound. Cleveland out.
Locomotive, hold your position. Over. Copy that. Standing by. 5344 out. NYC 5344. Take the green. Over. 5344. Thank you, sir. Out. You're lined up and clear inbound. Over. Roger that. 5344 out. Please go to restricted speed. Over. Engine is at restricted speed. Out. Going to the register room to sign out. 5344 out.
Dispatcher, this is 5403. We are tied down and marking off. Out.
Okay, so to wrap things up, while this was certainly not Lionel's best year by any means, and while I do have my criticisms for this locomotive, I am happy with what I got overall. Let me know what you guys think. Do you like the new Hudson best, or do you prefer any of Lionel's older Hudsons over this one? They've made a lot in the 125 years of their existence after all, and I do think each of them has something unique to offer. Anyways, hopefully you all have a safe and Merry Christmas this year with all of your loved ones, friends, and family, and here's to a better 2026. That's all for me, guys. I'll see you all again in the new year.